Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast, where we talk to foresters about how they are using digital technologies in their day-to-day forestry work. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast. So today I'm pleased to be joined with Enda Keane, CEO of Treemetrics. Enda, how are you?
Very good, Kevin.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining. And definitely for our listeners, Enda and I were just talking before starting this. You showed me a picture of his backyard in Ireland. Is it Cork? Cork you're based out of?
Cork, yeah.
Oh, it was beautiful because I was telling Enda just yesterday it was 42 degrees Celsius and hot and sticky, and Enda showing me this picture. I'm like, can you teleport me there? Because I was like, I will take that. And then I think you mentioned you actually don't get that much sun, and you're on the way to the beach right after this recording. So how have you been during this pandemic in Ireland? Maybe give our listeners and myself a context. Everybody's in a different spot, but you've been doing well.
Yeah, it's been it's been a really interesting time. I know a lot of people have been badly affected by it globally, but from a family perspective, I've had an enjoyable lockdown. Over the year and a half, it stopped me traveling, and that wasn't a bad thing actually.
Yeah.
We were doing a lot of trips, and in hindsight, we didn't need to do as many trips as we often thought we did.
True.
So Zoom and Google Meet and all these things have filled a big void, and the lockdown, people have reconnected with nature and got out walking and
That's
getting
true.
the family cycling, and it's amazing. The last year, it's been incredible. The talk about nature and carbon, the environment, climate change. It has really brought that to the fore. I don't know about you, but it's incredible the amount of companies that are committing to being carbon negative by 2030.
Yeah,
Major
absolutely.
corporations, everybody. Hopefully they'll all live up to their commitments.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely. So that'll be a theme we'll talk about today as we kind of move towards that. That's a great theme. And for the video watchers, I'm normally in some type of collared shirt. I'm rocking my 10 Trees t-shirt, so not endorsing or anything, but it's hot in Ottawa, so I'm going a bit more cash. Enda's more professionally dressed with a collar, but it's hot in Ottawa, so I'm going more casual. So Enda, let's get into it. I always like to ask, tell me how you began your forester's journey.
Yeah, so my dad was a forester, and so that was a good introduction. There's not many foresters in Ireland. We have a very small industry. Only when I started, there was only 7% of the country under trees. So we were once all a forest, and then along came the British and knocked all our trees for shipbuilding and gunpowder, and so we became obviously cows and cattle and sheep. That's our countryside. But over the last 30 years, hard to believe I'm nearly 30 years now in the industry, but there's been a huge emphasis on planting trees. So we're now up to 11% as a country.
Okay.
And I had an early grounding in with my dad's background, and then I took the plunge into the industry. Got a job in the summers and in the winters working as a forest laborer. So I started planting trees and spreading fertilizer and all that kind of stuff, and cutting trees. So I went off and studied at university and got my grounding and took on a career with the government for a few years, advising farmers to plant trees, and went in the private sector for a few years, then convincing people to invest in forestry and plant trees again, farms in particular. And then I left the industry for a while, took a 5-year break, went into the tech world, and came back to forestry to form Treemetrics. And that was driven by my first sight of lidar. I came across this terrestrial lidar scanner as part of my previous job.
So what year was that roughly? What year was that roughly when you started doing that?
2004.
2004. Okay. So early.
I came across terrestrial lidar, and we were doing visualizations of proposed factories, what they'd look like in the landscape.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That was part of our work, visual impact assessment and environmental impact assessment. And we were using using aerial lidar and then terrestrial lidar. And when I saw the terrestrial lidar for the first time, it just blew me away with the quality of the data. And contacted an old buddy of mine, Garrett Malooly, who's a
Right.
co-founder who you've met on your
Yep.
travels.
Yeah. In New
around the world.
Zealand, I think we always connect in
Yeah.
New Zealand, not in Ireland, but that's a side story. Yeah.
Yeah. And so myself and Garrett, we looked at the data. Garrett had more of a practical on the boots on the ground management experience than I had. And so showed the data to him, and we went to Finland for a week with the data. And we met with all the top industry players up there and said, look, we think we can make a better system for measuring trees and managing forests as a result, and got a good response from them. The Finns are very, they're very, as you know, they're very guarded. They're very insular in some ways.
I was going to say stoic in some respects at times.
Yeah. And they like to do things their own way, but we got a good response from them and said, look, if you can do it. But they did say, by the way, you're taking on a massive challenge because we're very slow. We're a very slow industry to adopt change and technology. And the measuring tape, they felt it was going to take about 30 years to disrupt the measuring tape.
Yeah, they're probably on track too, right? Like when we think about it, they're probably on track.
17 years and another 13 years or so to go to disrupt the forest industry. But yeah, that was a good trip, and we came back and we formed Treemetrics.
Okay, so that was a start. So thinking of that, it's like there was a buzz term I remember I always loved that you guys came up with, and it was IoT, but it wasn't the IoT as we know it today. So maybe tell me, where did that come from? Was that a Garrett Enda thing? Was that more of a, sitting at a local pub going, you know what, we're going to come up with this IoT? So maybe share with our listeners, what is IoT? And for those in the tech space, it's not what you think.
Well, IoTrees is our hashtag for IoT, and it came about because of IBM. So if we're looking in Ireland, we've got, I suppose we're always export focused. As a small company, you won't make your fortune in Ireland. You have to get out and you have to look abroad. And one of the lucky things about Ireland is that we've got some major tech companies basing themselves, their European headquarters in Ireland, because we're now the last remaining English-speaking Euro economy in Europe. So
that's true.
So we've always historically attracted the likes of Microsoft, Apple, Intel, Dell, you name it. We've got most of the major tech companies from America and from China basing themselves in Ireland, and so we've got good connectivity with the multinationals. And we, Treemetrics, we started to engage with those companies to learn, and you can't beat the guidance that these people will give you. They do see the future and they make the future.
Absolutely.
So IBM, we went to them with our vision and our plan, and that was the first time in 2010. That was the first time I heard of the phrase Internet of Things, IoT, and the cloud. And that was the first time I heard of the cloud.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other things. And so they had this lovely thing called the Three Eyes, which summarized what they called the world is going to get smarter, the smart planet. The Three Eyes was that the world is going to become more instrumented, interconnected, and intelligent.
Okay.
Instrumented through sensors, interconnected through the web and the cloud, and intelligent through analytics. And that was
cool.
It's amazing that was 10, 12 years ago that they showed us this is where the world was going to go, and we had to go to the cloud and prepare for the Internet of Things. And that's where we set about creating this idea of a platform. Now everyone uses this word platform. But, this where you pull in all your data, and you have a platform, and I have a platform. We all have platforms, but it is about pulling in data from different sensors, interconnecting it, and analyzing it, and feeding back the information back to the customer. And we were very lucky they gave us a huge route to go on for this Internet of Trees. And then the next lucky break, because it's all about luck and making your own luck and getting out and talking to people and learning. But we were lucky enough to be introduced to the European Space Agency.
Okay.
And they, in 2012, they gave us our first break where we got our first contract with them, which basically it was helping us to use their, the 3 pillars of space, which is satellite communications, Earth observation, and GNSS, global positioning.
Right.
And Treemetrics, we went in with our vision of where we want to go with this cloud platform, and thankfully over the years they've been very supportive with our government agency here, Enterprise Ireland. They do a great job in plugging you into agencies around the world, and so we were very lucky we got our break there. And over the last 10 years or so, we've gone back to ESA with as our vision and our view of the world is changing, and sensors are changing, and new satellites and new chips, everything's happening. We go back to Esri so often and say, hey, look, this is going to have an impact on the forest industry. Can we get some money off you guys to develop this? And thankfully, we do. We're quite successful in putting in that money to drive our R&D.
Yeah.
And one of those projects was called Internet of Trees, where we developed a dendrometer to put around the tree to remotely measure the growth of the trees. A number of our customers were asking for this. Connecting it up then was the next issue. How do you creating a mesh network, and how do you get that data back to base through, in some cases, satellite modems and so forth. And so that's a cool project. The sensors, the challenge is to make the sensors robust, that they'll survive for a long time, 10 years. So that's an ongoing project that we have. And as a company, we always have some R&D projects over here, and we have our main product. We're trying to make it more commercial and scale it. Another project we're working on this year is called Sat4Cert, which is satellite monitoring for forest certification.
Okay.
That's a cool project. It's a cool project where we're trying to streamline forest certification and using satellites to help cut the cost of auditing in particular.
Any particular satellite constellation that's the one that you guys are using? There's so many out there now. There's almost like there's too much data, but is there a special flavor that works for you in Treemetrics?
Yeah, we're obviously Sentinel 1, Sentinel 2.
That would be my guess,
given the east connection. But we're looking at all sorts of, over the years we've tested everything from Cartosat, Digital Globe. Obviously there's big cost implications and trade-offs.
Absolutely.
What you choose. But we're always looking at new sensors. That's ever evolving, as you know. It's incredible the amount of hardware that's gone up into space.
Yeah.
And so thankfully, we're very lucky in Europe with the European Space Agency, how open they are to helping small companies to help enable them to achieve R&D and innovation. And so that's been a great experience working with them. We've learned an awful lot from them. And this Sat4Cert project our prototype is due in a couple of months. We're showing it the industry, and with some great partners helping us. So Soil Association, who are a huge player in the forest certification world.
Right.
PEFC Global are helping us and guiding us, and some big commercial companies like Till Hill are a huge company here in the UK.
Yep.
They're helping us, and a couple other partners. So that's an example of what we try to do every couple of years. We try to keep our R&D going, and we have a new project as well, working with the Irish government, working with Dell and working with Oracle, working in the whole area of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and working with some really good data scientists in our university in College Dublin, my old alma mater. That's an exciting project. We won collectively 6.8 million funding, so that's nice. That's a huge shot in the arm for us and our partners to really power ahead with this AI thing, which is going to keep evolving.
Yeah, so let me jump in here right now, because there's a lot there per se. So like for our listeners, right, we've heard Earth observation, we've heard AI, terrestrial lidar, airborne lidar. There's like pretty much everything in the toolkit today. It sounds like you and Treemetrics, have been at the forefront, innovating, trialing different things. And I'm sure it hasn't been easy. You and I have been at this long enough. What we often vision, and we see the end. Sometimes it's a circuitous path. But maybe let's start with the lidar on the technology side. You said in the 2004 terrestrial. What are some of the key game changers, if that's the right word, that you've seen since you started? Because now we've got, the handheld lidars that people are excited. We've got like even the iPhone with the lidar built in there. But maybe share some thoughts, what you've seen, and are there any patterns you've seen on the lidar side? Does it still get you excited, or are you more like, it's becoming commoditized? It's like, I'm not sure this really makes sense. But is there something that kind of caught you by surprise as you've watched this lidar space unfold? And then we'll go into the other technology spaces to not educate our listeners, but share your experiences. But what do you think about lidar today and from where it came from?
Yeah, well, when I look back to 2004, myself and Garrett in Finland, and I reflect on the hardware that we had, it was crazy. It was a crazy idea, and it was naive as well, because yeah, the carrying of that, the cost of the hardware was crazy. The size of it and the weight of it was crazy, but the data was awesome, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so the massive game changer for us has been the iPhone 12 and the lidar sensor on that. And the good news is that from what we're hearing through the grapevine is that the iPhone 13 is going to have even a better sensor and
Okay.
more resolution, longer range. And we think, yeah, there's amazing handheld sensors. We've trialed them all. And yeah, we're 17 years processing terrestrial lidar and aerial lidar. And, to me, the big opportunity is the iPhone 12 because it's
Okay.
just, and newer models. And we searched far and wide, and we found a great company in Sweden called Arboria with Johan and his team, and we've teamed up with them. And yeah, so some of the biggest lessons we've learned is, I suppose, as a company, we needed to get better at collaborating and partnering rather than trying to do everything ourselves.
Agreed.
And so we've since the pandemic and the change in our lifestyle and traveling and everything else, and reflecting on the whole thing, selling forestry software is a tough industry. It's very, very
I know. We know.
And it's very hard to disrupt the big players who've got really powerful systems. The Syngeas, the Trimbles. They're not going to be easily disrupted. So you have to find your space, and we've got good traction now over the last few years supplying measurement, services, software services where people will upload their data. So a good example is a company in Costa Rica and Panama called Noveltique.
Okay.
They've been a great user of our system. So they collect their field measurements and they upload them to our cloud, and we process them and we analyze them and we give them feedback as to the growth and performance of their asset and management tools and stuff. And that's the type of work we want to become more good at,
Okay.
and supporting people on the ground. And then with the iPhone, we said, hang on a second here, this could be a huge game changer for the millions of forest owners that are out there. So in the European Union, we've got 16 million forest owners. In the US, there's many more millions. Canada, more and more private owners, obviously, Eastern Canada and so forth. And so we just said, can we develop systems and tools to try and democratize forest measurement, this gig economy that, you've these people driving around delivering you food nowadays. Can we get people who want to get out and work in the forest to go out and measure forests for people? And so we've gone after this software as a service world, teaming up with the likes of Arboreal and the iPhone application. And that's the big thing for us now is to try and keep moving in that direction, helping forest owners to assess their own forest. Obviously, the carbon market is going to be a big driver in that as well, because there's going to be more and more requirement for measurement. Like, if I'm being brutally honest, when I look back on it, the forest world survives with a minimum of measurement.
Yeah.
And it's only natural. It's such a vast, varied resource. It's too costly to put boots on the ground to collect enough data. So we're living in a vacuum in a lot of cases. We don't really know what's out there in our assets, and that's understandable given the scale. In Canada, the vastness of your resource is incredible.
Yeah.
So you can only spend so much money on the ground, and aerial lidar promised a huge amount, but unfortunately, it was so costly. It had major limitations because of the cost. Satellite imagery.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say when you say that, it's interesting because at the end of the day, with foresters, often it does come down to the economics, right? That no matter, you dealing with the terrestrial lidar, I remember that day. It's like you guys had to be in the best shape because those T lidar things were like 90, 100 pounds, right? So it's like hiking it in. It's like, oh, it's only 800 meters in, and by the time you get there, you're like, you need water, you need to stretch. It's like you probably threw your back out to scan it, and then you've got occlusion, right? And then so you got to move it around. And then it was probably like, who's hiking this sucker back? Because I did my penance getting it in, right? And so you're laughing at that. I can sense it's like, yeah, right. Remember those days. But what I find fascinating listening when you're describing that, Enda, is almost a shift away from like the nuts and bolts of the technology and focusing about the user, the problem. And when you're talking about the democratization of data, it's fascinating because we have all this great technology, and then yet also what we're hearing is, well, if we don't bring the end user along for the ride. It doesn't matter how good that tech is. So this iPhone thing's fascinating. But then right away in my mind, when you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, but I don't like the Apple ecosystem. I like Android. So what do you respond to that? And on top of that, it's like today, it's like, and it's like we just got hacked or we were subject to ransomware. Like, so if you're doing this, at the planet scale, I assume these cyber issues are like popping up. So what are some considerations for foresters as they're learning more about what Treemetrics does, thinking about their data footprint in the world? What are some best practices or common thoughts, like something as simple as buying Apple, iPhones often for a large organization, then we get into a mobile device management issue, which again, as an average Joe forester, you're like, who cares? It's a phone. But at the enterprise corporate level, those are things they worry about that sometimes maybe us forestry tech researchers never appreciated until after doing our time 10, 15, 20, or in your case 30 years, right? But thinking of maybe cybersecurity there, like what's your guidance there? What are your the things that you think about with your team as you look to safeguard your clients' data and this platform?
So I suppose one thing we did have to realize as well is it's not all about not just the iPhone, but the traditional measuring tape. People still want to use that. So we had to go back a step and forget about our fancy lidars and whatever, and just enable the bog standard data to be uploaded to our platform as well. So we built a simple Android application to upload DVHs and heights and stocking and species and process that as well. So that was a bit of some of the learnings and feedback, is that you're not going to transform this industry overnight. It's going to take time and time. And the iPhone will evolve, and I'm sure Samsung and other hardware developers will come with more lidar technology in future handsets. So it's cybersecurity is a major issue. Of course it is. We all know about the hacking that's gone on and all that world. So we just have to, for that reason, actually, Treemetrics, we've just recently gone back to IBM to all our data is going onto the IBM cloud. Actually, just we felt safer after doing a review of all our systems. We just felt safer that was a better home for our data for the time being, anyway.
Right.
We were AWS, and we're now making that transition to IBM, to the cloud, because of cybersecurity, etc. But no, it's an exciting time, and like as we said earlier, there's so many new satellites going up. There's so many new sensors coming. Ever evolving sensors, like terrestrial 3D sensors on your phone. Who would have thought that? 15 years ago. It's incredible what's after happening and evolving, and that's going to continue. We didn't even mention lidar and drones. That's a really exciting space.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm excited about it because as a company, we had to decide what were we going to be. If we were going to have this €90,000 piece of hardware, we had to focus on harvesting. We had to become. So we tried to become experts on harvest utilization, optimization, because that's where the money was. And so that's exciting, because aerial lidar at a stand level is awesome data from a prediction point of view, from an evaluation point of view. So there's a new sensor coming from the L1 lidar sensor from DJI, for example. That's exciting because that's going to push the price down of aerial lidar dramatically. And as a company, as I said to you, we tended to focus more on the high precision end of the forestry chain, which is at the time of harvest. Thankfully now over the last couple of years, because of the iPhone, and we're really now focusing on the macro view, given the fact that you can go out and collect more data a lot more cost effectively with the iPhone and other sensors and the boots on the ground. So I suppose foresters, one thing I always try to say to foresters is that they have to be honest with themselves and reflect more about the data and the quality of the data that they're using to manage their resource. And in many cases, it's poor data, and that's understandable because of the vastness and the variation. The big issue is the variation across the crop. We've just such a huge varied resource,
right?
And there's only so much money you can spend by collecting plot data on the ground, and that's never going to change. Manpower is continuing going to be expensive.
Yeah.
These robot dogs and whatever.
Yeah, you saw the robot dogs, right? The Boston
Yeah,
Dynamics, and the Huawei has this Terminator looking one. Yeah.
yeah, they're going to have a role in the forestry, I think, in the future, where they'll set them off and let them free and they'll measure and stuff. But ultimately, we need better data, more plot data,
Yeah.
to predict what's out there in the forest resource and to manage it better. And so that's where we'll focus on over the coming years, is really double down on the precision piece around the harvesting side of things.
Right.
And
Right.
just better predict what's in that stand, better predict what logs are going to come out of it, or carbon, better measure the carbon, the contents of the wood.
Right.
By supporting that user to get out there and collect faster, quicker data. And that's one thing I love with the iPhone 12. I've used it the last few months. I've been out measuring every so often. I love it, actually. It's really slick when you're walking around with the phone, and you're getting your DBHs and your heights really fast. It's hard to believe how fast. And that feeds straight back into our system, and we get automated money reports back to the farmer.
Nice.
And that's cool. Like you're that evening when you're exiting the forest, you just sign into your ForestHQ, and we've got the money there with the latest log prices driving the value of that person's forest.
Yeah. So for our listeners, when you say ForestHQ, it's the first that's kind of jumped on our conversation. Maybe share. I know, but for our listeners, like, that's the Treemetrics platform. Maybe share with our listeners. Let's role play. Hey, Enda, nice to meet you. I'm in Costa Rica with I own $1 bajillion. I wish I want to get into the carbon game or get it on the exchanges. Like walk us through, like, ForestHQ is a platform. We already talked about, hey, you're going to do your mensuration with your iPhone and whatnot, or whatever gadget, doesn't matter. But ForestHQ, that's my main portal into the Treemetrics world for all the magic. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like most forest management systems, the basic underlying foundation is a mapping system. So your GIS tools, very simplified GIS tools, because we felt that too many GIS systems were too complicated and too many functions. So we've stripped it back to its core tools for digitizing or mapping or uploading your shape files, and then basic remote sensing tools to process that data to work out, for example, the productive area of the forest, how many gaps are in your forest. We have tools for that.
Okay.
Tree counting, if that's what you want to do. But more importantly, just uploading your plot data and creating a forest measurement, right? And evaluation. And then we have very simple management tools for planning what to do in the forest, not big, fancy predictive planning systems, just very, very simple. I'm going to fix the gate here. I'm going to
gets the job done. Yep.
Yeah. Next, more like operations planning, where you're going to do work on the ground over the next 5 or 10 years, and that's ForestHQ. Then we've nice little plugins where you can upload your harvester data to overlay, all your
nice
production information onto the system, and if it's a drone image that you have, you can upload that to the system. If it's an aerial lidar data, you can upload that to the system. So it's about trying to be more functional, make it easier for people to upload their data, make it easier to integrate with existing systems. So as I said earlier on, we're not going to disrupt Trimble's and the big players. We're going to have to work with them and find our space to work with them. So that's what we've focused a lot of energies on the APIs and the integration piece.
Right. That's a good strategy. Decouple the system and yet be interoperable with them. Yeah. Great strategy. Yeah, for sure. And
get better at one thing, definitely get better at collaboration and partnership with other companies, other tech. There's a huge opportunity to work with all the different people that are out there measuring stacks of timber or measuring, growth rates or whatever it is. There's loads of people out there doing their thing around fire management, as one of your latest speakers was talking about. That's awesome data. And we're in an era now where you're just going to have to keep evolving.
Yes.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
Keep evolving. The new sensors, the new reality of our forests, they're changing rapidly due to climate change and fires and disease and insects. And as a result, we got to get better at measuring them and monitoring them and managing them as a result. And so I suppose, the other big thing is carbon. I've spent a couple of years really studying, and I heard carbon when I was in college 30 years ago,
Okay.
or almost 30 years ago. I heard of carbon, and there was going to be an exciting market for carbon, and I'd given up on it, to be honest with you, but it's amazing the unbelievable traction that forestry carbon and other carbon markets have got, or offset markets have got, in the past year alone.
But it's probably, do you think it's from the pandemic? Like, in all honesty, like things foresters used to think and the markets think were impossible. The pandemic hit, and then suddenly everything, the world flips upside down, and everything that was not possible is now possible. Do you think that's kind of bled into that thinking, and now ecosystem services are back in the forefront? It's not just timber and forest, it's all the other things they're doing in these exchanges. So what are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely think it was, last March 2020, when we started to get locked down and people were suddenly, we stopped, everyone took a pause and took a breath. The whole world took a breath, and all of a sudden we'd nowhere to go, only out to the local forest or wherever, track, to get away from, and people suddenly started to look around them and take an interest in their environment, and companies have had to go through major reflection on the office environment and their impact on the world. And I suppose look at Microsoft, the commitments they've made, Amazon, huge commitments to offset their historical footprint, and many more corporations. Obviously, the oil industry and the gas industry have been claiming these. You go to a filling station now to buy your diesel, and they're claiming it's carbon neutral, for example, and so like, it's great. It don't get me wrong, it's brilliant. And you got the the Trillion Tree campaign.
Yep.
You got Mark Beanoff from Salesforce driving tree planting. So the world has woken up to the opportunity for planting trees and better managing trees and forests.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, we've got this incredible reality sinking in on climate change and wildfires and all that brings, and disease and pests. And with that comes huge opportunity. The sad thing is it's having massive impacts, as you know quite well, with your wildfires in Canada, but everywhere, all over the world.
Greece as well, California.
One thing I think as foresters we need to get better at is talking to the world about what we're observing. So over my 17 years, I've traveled to over 35 countries around the world. I've been really lucky with myself and Garrett and my colleagues. We've traveled the world, Australia, New Zealand, all the way, South America, North America, everywhere, and Europe, and we're, foresters, they're very similar all over the world. They like a beer, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they love the environment. A lot of them are into shooting and fishing and living outdoors and love the environment.
Yeah.
And the conversation always, over the 17 years, it was always, things are changing. And I remember talking to some foresters in the Nordics, in Finland, and they were just worrying about the ever shorter winters and the milder winters where they couldn't get the machinery into sites. There were traditionally, the permafrost would allow them to bring in the big machine. That was changing, and it's happening, and we get these IPCC reports every so often the world. But foresters have been seeing this for years. Like, I was in Madrid at the last COP meeting in Madrid, and I remember meeting a forester, and he was saying to me about the research showing the shortening winters in the north of Spain and the Pyrenees, and impact it's having on forestry there. And then you look what's happening across Europe, globally, everywhere, fires and insect attack. So foresters need to talk more about what they have observed in the past and the rapid change that we've seen over the last number of years, and we need to be part of the discussion around the solution.
Absolutely.
And with like the example of the wildfires, there's a huge opportunity to go back in there and replant those forests. And get carbon finance to help drive that, and planting of trees globally. There's now a huge opportunity for foresters to be a part of that dialogue and a part of that market to plant those trees.
It's a good point, and just jump in there. And one thing I think you nailed it on the head is, the way I'd phrase it is, as foresters, well, anyone in the forestry space, we have to get better at telling stories. And part of doing this podcast is exactly for that purpose. As people give me feedback, they're like, it's so great to hear different worldviews, different viewpoints from different geographies, different technologies at play, and they're forming those common patterns. And even as you talk about climate change, within my network, and as you say, people in the extremes are going to see it sooner. The changes, the Canadian Arctic, it's like we're already seeing it. I've always said, I actually don't really care whether you believe or in climate change or not. It's going to hit you in the face, and then it's going to hit you in the wallet, and it'll be undeniable. And at that point, it's like, the mass, or the mob, if we want to call it, is going to rise. And I think globally we're feeling that just as everyday citizens. Like, you look out your window and you're just doing the WTF, like, what is going on? But thinking of that, I'm just going to kind of pivot us back to, like, thinking of technology, and you mentioned fire and whatnot, and UAVs and tech. It's like, I'm curious to know, like, in Ireland, because I know a lot of listeners. Well, my wife's got Irish roots, so she's gone back. I've never been, but in Ireland, it's, as you mentioned, not quite tied to the EU there, but from a tech stack, I've always heard open source versus, at least on the GIS side, Esri, or maybe open source on closed. And we've talked about ForestHQ. Maybe for our listeners, tell us more about your technology stack. What like, not the details, the secret sauce, as opposed to what are some of those common things? Like, are you a Linux server? You're in the IBM ecosystem, but is it Esri? Is it open source? You're building custom things, but maybe bring us up to speed on what that stack looks like per se.
Yeah, we are open source on the GIS side, so definitely. But we have to accept that we have to be able to work with the Esri systems and integrate. So I think the key word is integration. That's and APIs and that world, and we've tried to completely open ourselves up to be able to receive data, send data. That's really, thankfully there's a clear standard around how you measure a forest and manage a forest. So we're sticking to those tried and trusted standards of data formats and so forth. And
right,
Stanford D is an important format, although I think the manufacturers need to stick to it.
That's true.
It's frustrating and stuff. But yeah, I think the key thing is it's going to keep changing, though. Like these sensors, like there's a new sensor going up next year. There's going to be the biomass sensor from ESA. So check out the biomass sensor. That's going to be a dedicated forestry analysis, data collection satellite.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Multi-spec, hyperspec, like what?
Yeah, exactly. Lidar capability as well, I'm told, and we're still learning about what's going to be actually on the payload. But yeah, it's a dedicated forestry measurement sensor.
No kidding! Wow.
Which in itself is a very important, and hopefully they'll open it up like they did with the unbelievable Sentinel systems. And so yeah, we all know it. We're going to have more and more data, and it's going to be cheaper, free in a lot of cases, free in inverted commas. But yeah, we're going to have more and more data. And the trick in all of this is that it goes back down to basics. We have to get better and better at measuring, and that's a great thing. And what really excites me about carbon is finally measurement is going to be hugely important, and the quality of the measurement, because it's frustrated the life out of me when you come with this precision sensor to measure better, and deep down, they don't need it. In a lot of cases, forest managers of huge scale or any kind of scale, they can live with, okay measurement data, and they'll work it out as they go. They'll throw some more trees at the market if they need to cut more trees to keep the market happy. And that was always a frustration, that the reality is that they didn't need the precision that we were bringing. But thankfully, with the carbon markets and the increasing value of wood, measuring it better is now finally becoming important.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're hoping after 17 years that it mightn't take 30 years that the Finns told us to revolutionize the industry. And the iPhone, again, just that basic sensor is really, really an important tech evolution for us.
Yeah.
Just your basic measurements. You don't need a DBH tape anymore. You don't need a hypsometer, your vertex. You can do it on your phone,
Yes.
and that's a huge step for us as a company.
So,
And
so
we'll
thinking
be
of
better.
data, and we started off with the podcast. So you started talking about deep learning. So obviously, deep learning subset of machine learning, subset of artificial intelligence, but that's all driven by lots of data, typically
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
quality data. So in your work, as you move towards that, maybe share with our listeners your views on deep learning. Is that, 2004 lidar, woo, it's like great. You really look at the literature, goes all the way back to the 60s when it was started to be experimented, albeit at a low frequency and profile mode only. But do you think deep learning is that next thing in the forestry part that's going to change things, or do you think there's some other tech trend there that's equal?
I think
Or
just the whole drive in AI, actually, learning. So one thing we need to get better at is capturing the data that we have. So one great example is, I know you work in this whole space, is the harvester data, the cut to length machines. They have awesome data, GPS positioning, log production, tree size distribution throughout the crop. I think that's hugely important data to capture. And even if you're not going to use it for now, you will use it in the future.
for
And
sure.
capture that data, and because it will be fantastic learning into the future. And we as a company, we always kind of felt that we were under the cosh. We were always being questioned about the precision of how really good were we at measuring. So we embraced the harvester data and the weighbridge information
Mm-hmm.
as a real test as to how good did we really do, just to feed it back to see could we improve how we were doing things and learn from it. And so artificial intelligence and machine learning and all these, deep learning, you need data to feed that back into your system to help improve your system. So that's one thing I'd implore forest managers is put in a process of capturing data, even if you're not going to analyze it for now. Record it and capture it, provided it's cost effective and cheap and
Yeah.
cheerful. Capture it and have it there for future use, because it will inform in the future. And lidar data will be awesome in the future. The historic lidar data will be awesome in the future to refer against the new data coming through. But yeah, we're as an industry, we've been poor at storing that data and keeping it. But we need to get better at doing that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah,
The,
I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this one, because you and I, we've been doing this for quite a while. Often as we're bringing new technology, we think of that innovation, that adoption curve. We got the great chasm where things tend to fall apart. You got the early adopters, you got the majority, the laggards, and stuff like that. I personally think, foresters in general, it's rare to find one in that early adopter. You can find them, but most of them tend to kind of sit further down the curve. But I was even on a UFRO call yesterday, and it was about forest digitalization. That seems to be another buzzword per se. But it was interesting. I was watching a presenter from Portugal, and the whole thing is kind of what we're talking about, where we have different systems, resources, harvesters, forester, whatever gear, sending data, Stanfordese into some centralized database, maybe a couple, and then they're all coming together to drive analytics. And when I watched that, again, I did a PhD, so I can relate to the academic world, but the whole thing I thought of is, I know there's the Treemetrics of the world that have already done this, and it felt like they were reinventing the wheel. And on top of that, you and I both know commercializing innovation is a hard game. So even though in principle it works in the academic world, there's all sorts of different factors. But thinking of foresters who are looking to embark, we definitely have some listeners that are like doing everything, definitely the early adopters, and some that are just kind of the late majority, the laggards. But if you were to guide a forester listening to this who wants to get into the game, if we call it that, in one of these technologies, do you have any pro tips to help ease that transition into learning, or maybe de-risk based on your experiences over the time with Treemetrics? Aside from just, hey, call Enda Treemetrics, but is it about researching it? Is it about collaboration, as you've put with the IBMs of the world, or the ESAs of the world? is there a general rule of thumb you've kind of, anecdotally come to and said, this is the secret recipe to realize success as you try and bring digital transformation to your organization? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's look, as I said to you a few times in this chat, there are existing systems there that are good. Most forestry companies have good systems that are doing the job, and you just have to accept that's just, they're going to get better. The existing systems are going to get better, but eventually disruption happens to everybody, right? Innovation keeps happening. And I think the big innovation is going to be around the sensors, right? And that's going to change every 6 months. You're going to see newer and newer, cheaper sources of data and sensors. And you have to look at yourself and look at your system and say, are you prepared for that evolution of new data that's coming? That's what I would say. That's what we're preparing for all the time, is to be prepared for these new sensors, cheaper and better data. And as an industry, we need better data. The reality is we're making an awful lot of decisions on poor data because of the costs and the realities of such a vast resource. But I think, as foresters, the biggest cost is getting into the car and going out there to visit the forest. So I think every forester, no matter what they're doing, should have some sort of a data collection device with them and collect some data, even for 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, collect some data, even if it's just some DVHs and heights and stocking, and upload them to the system. It'll start to fill the gaps. And there's massive gaps in the resource information. And
right.
Yeah, so I would say to get them to reflect on how good is their data really, and the decisions they're making from it.
Great advice.
That's been a frustration of mine. We know there's some unbelievably poor data, and in most cases it's a positive story. I think a lot of people are underestimating their actual resource. We're conservative by nature, and we're not properly evaluating the amount of trees that are out there in the world. I think for the most part, there's a good story out there.
Absolutely.
As you said, Kevin, the big thing for me, thankfully, the exciting thing for me is that under the new carbon world, measurement is suddenly hugely important.
Yeah.
And it's hard to believe that from a sustainable forest management point of view, measurement was never really important. It was just a tick box.
Right.
You had to sustainably harvest.
Right. Absolutely.
How can you be sure you're sustainably harvesting if your prediction of what's out there is it's poor prediction? In a lot of cases, it's poor prediction of what's actually out there. Yeah. And you're using planning tools that are feeding in crap data. And if there's crap data going in, you're going to get crap information out the other side.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, you said it a bit more politely than I did.
Yeah. So as we look to winding down, and this is awesome. We could chat forever. Again, you and I, we got enough arrows in our back. As I joke that we could probably have the explicit version of this podcast and provide hilarious entertainment. But as we look at winding down from a technology trends point of view, rapid fire question all lumped together, and you can just share. I know we've kind of touched on them, but from a trends point of view, what's getting you excited? 1 year, 3 year, 10 year? What does that world look like? Rapid fire to you. What are those key tech things?
1 year, it's the iPhone 13.
Okay.
Longer range, higher resolution, lidar, measurement in your pocket, precision measurement. We're going to get taper information. We're going to get straightness information from that. Defects as well, potentially, from what I'm hearing. That the Apple HQ for Europe is just up the hill here, so I'm trying to listen in on some of the guys going in there. what's coming out. But 3 years time, as I said, you got the new biomass sensor going up. You've got all these nanosats going up. I'm hoping that high resolution data becomes cheaper. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So at the moment, you got your 30 centimeter resolution sensors. There's more of them going up, thankfully. Airbus are launching some more of them. So the more of those sensors, hopefully they'll start to make that data cheaper and easier to get. Even higher resolution than that again. I think the aerial lidar sensors on the drones are going to get cheaper. That's going to be hugely important for the industry. So that's the 3 year window of just ever increasing better data and more available, cost effective, continued disruption of the EO market by, hopefully there's going to be some clever guys sending up some nanosats that get super high resolution, like 10 centimeters from our research is where you can start to really delineate the crown. It's like the magic number.
Okay.
Better than that. So single tree, we've all talked about single tree. So that's obviously a very important piece. If we can, obviously, you got your understory as your picture showing in the background there. You got the understory uncertainty, but at least we could start to generalize what big trees are out there. So single tree will continue to evolve and get more easier to and cost effective to understand at mass scale.
Do you think we're there now, or you think we still got?
Yeah, we are there now. Only the cost of the data is still crazy.
Okay. So it's the economics. Right? Yeah. Okay.
The computer processing part of it is, and then I'm very excited about, obviously, without giving away trade secrets, I'm very excited around NFTs and carbon credits, blockchain. That world is going to be ever increasingly play a part in our resource management and our resource utilization or monetization of our resource. Like, I see the forest, it always has been a great, if you're lucky enough to own some forestry, it's been a great bank of, yes, of value for the owner. And I believe that that'll become a real bank. I think that forestry, the public will invest in that asset, albeit maybe for carbon to begin with, but you're going to have more and more tokenization, small ownerships of forests by millions and millions of people who will demand high quality management, high quality carbon. Biodiversity is going to be hugely important, as we know. That's going to be a major driver for future management of forestry, that we get better at that and better custodians of the environment. And yeah, I think the other thing is that we're going to have to move faster. As foresters, we have to be part of the solution. This climate change thing is not going away. It's actually accelerating,
getting worse. Yep.
So we have to come with our vision, our plans, how to tackle this, not just some bureaucrats or whatever COP next month or whatever it's on in Scotland next. We have to come with major plans as to how to solve this. You know, you got Mark Beanoff saying they're going to plant 1 trillion trees. Where are they going to plant this? What are they going to plant? Yep. You know, foresters have to take a real part of this. There's huge amounts of capital suddenly coming from industry, ESG money. How is that going to be properly quality planted, quality managed? Massive opportunity for our sector globally. So the future is really bright. It's distressing from an environmental point of view and from a change point of view, but from an economic point of view and from a career point of view, the huge opportunity. So I think we need to become a bit braver, a bit louder, and talk about our what we're seeing as foresters. Yep. Out there globally, start talking about the change that we're observing, get vocal, get into the national media, talk about it, talk about our fears, and talk about our solutions, and become part of that solution.
Absolutely.
Come up with the ideas, the mad ideas, the scale. We need this. The world is broken, and it's going to need massive scale of solutions, like the Trillion Tree campaign.
Absolutely.
And work with those people and get involved. And I think we're sitting back, a lot of us are sitting back going, that's a great idea and great. But actually start, you know, where the plants going to come? How are they going to plant these trillion trees? Where are the seedlings going to come? What sort of seed? You know, big role from us foresters, you know.
Absolutely. I love it, Enda. Like, that's an awesome way to end the pod in terms of 1, 3, 10. You know, to recap for our listeners, you know, 1 year end Treemetrics, they're excited about that iPhone 13 coming out with the gadgets. It is a pricey piece of gear, but again, sneak into the Apple HQ up the street there and grab me some swag and gear. Would love it. We've also heard data, you know, the sensors and that 3-year time horizon. You know, looking forward at 10, there's a lot of problems and yet opportunities that foresters, I always say, have to, you know, got to beat our chest more, tell our stories proudly, loudly, you know, and instead of, you know, just, you know, people don't even realize foresters are like the greatest stewards of nature, right? And there's these people are creating the narratives for foresters instead of maybe foresters taking a hold of them themselves. But I love it. We don't have time to go into NFTs for our listeners, non-fungible tokens, the whole crypto space, Web 3.0, blockchain, DeFi. So if you're listening, you're like, what is Enda and Kevin talking about? Yeah, if you felt like you missed the internet of the 94s and rode that wave, then start doing your research into just Google Web 3.0, start looking into that. I agree with you. I can connect the dots. And as you said, those words are things I've been thinking about. So, hey, normally it's like, if we could travel, would have loved to have done this pod with you in person, just sit side by side. I think I joked, I said, oh, you're Irish, you're going to go get a Guinness now. And actually, Guinness, I think is my winter drink. And you had a lighter beer in the summer, but nonetheless, nonetheless, you're going to the beach. So I'm kind of jealous because I'm just starting my day per se, but,
I gotta show you for those of you.
So people watching this, you got to check this out. Oh, pan down a bit, Enda. I can't see the back here. I just saw the sky. Yeah. So look at that. Like, isn't that incredible? Oh,
the sun always shines in Ireland. You got to come. Bring your good wife over to see more of her roots and
absolutely
visit.
Absolutely, I love it. So Enda, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the way? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn, website. What's the best way to get you?
LinkedIn is the easiest way. Email enda@treemetrics.com. ENDA, good easy name to remember. And just keep in touch, everybody, and reach out, and happy to talk with people about their ideas and where it's all going as well in more detail. So thanks for the opportunity, Kevin. I like the podcast. It's a good. I'm getting into. I love listening to other foresters and talking about what's going on in their world, and so fair play for doing it. It needed to be done, and
absolutely.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I love it. So, and be safe, and we will talk soon. Looking forward to maybe some collaborations together in the future. So, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, good man. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Kevin.